When I was studying at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, I met a rabbinical student named Charlie Citron Walker. He was a bit of a quiet guy, but extremely kind and considerate to everyone that he met. After Charlie graduated, he accepted a call to Texas, where he became a rabbi of a synagogue in the suburb of Dallas. He was the first full-time rabbi that congregation had ever had. They were a fairly new synagogue plant, but they had a lot going on. Not only did they have the traditional services that synagogues have, they also had a Hebrew school that Charlie oversaw as well. And in the midst of this, there were also the weddings, the funerals, the bat and bar mitzvahim, counseling sessions, services to plan, budgets to balance, disputes to mediate. Charlie had his hands full. And then COVID happened. And Charlie had to help the community move the services to online, and that included the Hebrew school classes as well. Well, one day, Charlie, along with 3 other congregants, were setting up for a live stream service. And there was a knock on the door of the synagogue. Charlie went to the door, and it was a stranger, but Charlie invited that person in as if they were family. Charlie offered the man tea, and they started chatting as they were waiting for the service to start. The service started, they started broadcasting live, and then the man that Charlie had invited into the synagogue pulled out a gun and held Charlie and the 3 other congregants hostage for 12 hours, most of which was streamed live because the guy wouldn't let them stop the service. As the afternoon progressed, the guy became more and more agitated. And Charlie figured that he had better figure out some way to escape before it's too late. So when the man wasn't paying attention, Charlie grabbed a chair and threw it at the guy. And Charlie and the 3 other people with him ran out of the synagogue safely, and no one was harmed. Well, Charlie's bravery and quick thinking saved himself and the people that God had put in his care. But his entire congregation now needed caring also, because they had just seen the rabbi and their friends held hostage. And so Charlie spent the next few months caring for the traumas of his people, while also having to take care of himself and everything that he went through. It was a tough time. But what's most amazing to me about this story wasn't Charlie's bravery or his quick thinking. It was his compassion. And it becomes even more clear when we find out about one other piece of the story. A few weeks before that man entered the synagogue and took Charlie and 3 other people hostage, there were some influential leaders in the synagogue who moved to get Charlie fired. And they succeeded. They called a vote. They revoked his contract, told him he'd have to go somewhere else. And Charlie told them that he was willing to stay there caring for the people until they found another rabbi to replace him. That was a few weeks before he was taken hostage. A few weeks before he stayed on voluntarily for a few more months to help care for that congregation who experienced trauma. The story makes me wonder, how do we practice compassion when people don't like us? When they tell that to us, to our face? Or they don't accept our compassion well, and sometimes even reject it. Well, I think Charlie's story reminds me a lot of our Old Testament reading from Exodus 17, where Moses is trying to lead a people who are often grumbling, complaining, to the point of mutiny. When we start Exodus 17, the people have been on quite a journey with Moses. Moses had led them out of slavery in Egypt. The people had seen miraculous deliverances. When it looked like all was lost, God, through Moses, came to be with the people and see them safely through. They had crossed on the dry floor of the Red Sea after Moses had raised his hands and parted the waters. But now they were in the wilderness, waiting to enter their new home. And they were thirsty because they didn't have a reliable source of water. It was a real need. People need water to live. But the people responded to this need with anger, with fear, and recrimination. They ganged up against Moses, and they accused him of bringing them out to that spot just so he could kill their children. It's quite an accusation. And Moses became afraid, and he went to God and asked God what he should do. And in essence, God told Moses to practice compassion. God tells Moses to go to a particular rock, to take his staff, and to hit that rock. And then water would flow out, providing the people with the need that they wanted and needed. It's an amazing story that fuses compassion with courage, because it takes a lot of courage to remain compassionate with a people who don't like you, and even who are conspiring to kill you. But we learn something additional through this story. We learn that in this story, the people were not ultimately angry at Moses. They were angry at God, because the people were afraid that God had abandoned them, that God had led them, but then left them there in that desert. And I think we can learn from this that when we practice compassion, there will be times when people don't receive it well. Folks, just like these people in this passage, can project their hurts and fears onto us, just like they did to Moses. And in most cases, when people say and do hurtful things, it's because they are acting out of their own sense of hurt and fear. This is why over and over again in the Bible, God encourages us to move past fear, to not let fear guide our actions, and instead to embrace love. But in order to do this well, we have to be grounded in compassion. And as Donna Barr told us last week, compassion means to suffer with another. And once we've done that work of sitting with the pain of the people around us, we're able to look past their hurtful words and actions, and we can see the pain that's underneath that's causing them to act this way. And we can see a work of healing that God may be inviting us to join in with. This is why practicing compassion is so important for you and me as Christian people. God challenges us to have the courage to stop these cycles of hurt, which makes violence, which causes more hurt, which causes more violence. This kind of compassion that intervenes in that cycle and stops it is the kind of compassion that Charlie had on that day when that person came in. And it was the same compassion that Charlie kept on practicing those months after, even when his congregation had rejected and hurt him. This is the kind of compassion that God called Moses to when the Hebrews were conspiring against him out there in the wilderness. Friends, it's the kind of compassion that God is calling you and me to embrace and practice today.